going to start off by saying this. Have you watched any film or TV show or even a song where you've seen a reference or heard a reference to something else within the literary or media world? Or even this, do any of these seem a little bit familiar to you? Can you notice any clear links between the two? So intertextuality, what on earth is it? It's basically when a film, a book, a TV show, anything along those lines makes reference to something else. It doesn't have to be a big reference, it could even be as simple as a cover line on a magazine, but it has to make reference to something within the media or the literary world. It has to be a physical text. It's also the concept of reshaping, rehashing, tweaking, changing an existing text to create meaning. People sometimes call intertextuality intertextual references, meta or meta references, and sometimes people like to just call them Easter eggs. However, we tend to use the term Easter eggs, big media teachers, when something is from within the shared world or the shared universe, like Marvel, for example. It's often used to create these feelings of familiarity, recognition, and/or nostalgia for the audience. It is such a powerful concept, and it's a massive audience pleasure because it makes viewing much more pleasurable. Because of the associations that we get with that familiarity, and when we encounter these whilst we're watching, you get that pleasurable viewing of like, oh, I get that, I know that. Now, I love intertextuality and all my students are very, very well aware of this. It's one of my favourite things in contemporary media. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, especially my postmodernism video, you will have seen this, and my students know that I am very extra about intertextuality. So we're going to do a little community case study now, discussing a really big player in the intertextual game. It's a very, very clever and what we'd call meta sitcom. It's what we would also call postmodern, and postmodernism is a term that I've discussed in other videos that I discuss a lot with my A-level students and a teeny bit with my GCSE students. And if you want to hit those top levels in your GCSE and in your A-levels, you should understand the concept of postmodernism, and intertextuality is just one aspect of that. Postmodernism does things like pastiche and parody, and it blurs the boundaries between high and low culture in terms of postmodernism as an aesthetic. However, intertextuality is so powerful that it is potentially the biggest postmodern thing that we see in films and in television and other media text nowadays. So, everything has been done before. That's the kind of common idea of postmodernism. So what we need to do is we need to reshape that stuff, we need to rehash it, and we need to create meanings in modern day stuff by linking back to it. So certain texts are inherently postmodern because we've seen everything already. And sometimes certain intertextuality can come from just genre conventions, it can come from a physical reference to another text, or it can use callbacks into previous parts of that text. So for example, you're watching an episode in season 3 of a sitcom and it can call back to something that's happened in season 1, and that can be meta, that can be intertextual. So why do they do this? They do it because nostalgia is such a powerful ideological currency in media nowadays. Here are a few examples from season 1 of Community. There are so many great ones from seasons 1 to 6, even the gas leak season of season 4, but I focus on some early episodes here.
Almost.
What are you doing? No!
It's the hilarious guy on guy.
One rule I asked you to follow. One.
Look! I had it made before he died. It's not in bad taste.
Out, Winger!
Oh no. I hope it wasn't a masterpiece.
Well, it's not now. Hopefully you can quite clearly see why Community is an amazing example of intertextuality. But it's not just film and TV shows that are at it. Social media, the internet, massively utilises intertextuality. Memes are one of the biggest forms of intertextuality. But it's quite interesting because intertextuality might seem like it's kind of new within the last few decades, but it's really not. Roland Barthes, who A-level and GCSE students will know for either things like denotation, connotation, semiotic, action, enigma code, spoke an awful lot about this in the late 60s. So he announced there was the death of the author and the birth of the reader, basically meaning that a text unity lies within its origin, but not in its destination. In other words, what this means is there's no longer such a thing as something original. There's no original text. And again, this is a very, very postmodern idea. It highlights how interpretation lies with the viewer, with the reader, not with the producer. And it's what you get out of viewing or reading that makes the text subjective and enjoyable or not enjoyable. And it's the audience that creates meaning, regardless of what the author might be intending to say, which links a little bit to Stuart Hall's encoding, decoding model. It doesn't always matter what the preferred reading is, it's what you get out of it as a consumer, as an audience. But there's a problem. Intertextuality is getting lazy. Producers, directors, anyone involved in the media industry, even screenwriters, are starting to use it as a payoff rather than to create extra meaning. It's more used now for fan service, not to create anything extra. And this is starting to wear a little bit thin with audiences, especially those who are looking for intelligent payoffs, looking for intelligent storytelling, and it's not a substitute for good narrative. The longer a show goes on, all they're going to do is bring in these tedious mini Easter eggs and links to everything that's already been done, and it's not a substitute for solid, good storytelling. Here's an example of a bit of lazy intertextuality that's, for a children's film, for a reference that kids aren't going to get, but it's attempting to bring in the adult viewers.
All right, Walter and Jesse are back, so I'm leaving now.
I've no qualms with the Breaking Bad reference, none at all. It was so obvious from the little blue chemicals, the yellow jumpsuits. It was that final point where he's on the phone and he says, Jesse and Walter, it's too much, you don't need to go that far. You're bashing people over the head with that reference when most people who have seen Breaking Bad will get it straight away. And we're seeing lazy intertextuality all of the time. And unfortunately, it happens a lot with shows or with films that are in the same universe. Like we said, like Marvel, DC, so on. We may be at peak TV, but have we hit peak intertextuality? I'm going to say I don't think so. We're still getting solid intertextual references from loads of TV shows, even great Easter eggs from certain things. I'm going to talk about the Shaw-reverse, so Michael Shaw's programmes, so you may know him from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Office US, Parks and Recreation, and The Good Place. Now, The Good Place is one of the most clever shows on television. If you're not watching it, I highly suggest you do because it is absolutely fantastic. And in the last season, we're seeing more and more callbacks to things within other programmes that Shaw has created. These are clever. They're not bashing you over the head with them. They are just subtle in the background for that person that wants to read that little bit more into the text. And it just makes the experience all the more pleasurable when you spot them. The reason that intertextuality is so popular, it's because it's so pleasurable. We live in this media-saturated world where pretty much most of us have access to some form of media, even to most forms of media. And at any given moment, we can just go on our phones or on our computers and access something if we want to. So if you watch something with a reference and you don't get it straight away, you can Google it and you can find that reference and you can research that text. But if you do, it makes you feel clever. It makes you feel all the more powerful and pleasurable because you get it, you know it, you feel like, oh, I understand this. And that is a really powerful feeling. Media producers want you to get these pleasurable sensations when you're watching their films or their TV shows and so on and so forth, because you associate them with this nostalgia, this warm, this fuzzy feeling, and it just makes you feel happy. And if it didn't, then we wouldn't be getting these prequels and these sequels and these films in the shared universes. It just wouldn't happen. However, it does. Why? Because most things, unless it's for public service, is for money and it's for profit. And at the end of the day, that is the end goal when you're making a media text, regardless of any form of artistic integrity. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to at BC Media Depths if you want to see more videos, and there will be some from our students coming very soon. Thanks for watching.